First thing people usually ask is, how many strings do I play? And I can see it, sit in the audience and sort of count my tuning pegs to work out how many strings I actually have. But yeah, the truth is it has 14 strings. 7 shorter ones on the fingerboard and 7 long ones. Another question that people usually ask is, we don't see you fingering the long strings. How do you do that? And the answer is, the 7 long strings have no fingerboard. You have to play them open. They're tuned in a scale. They have a G major scale. So you just have to choose the right one, which can be a little bit tricky sometimes because there's so many of them. And then the shorter strings are tuned more like a guitar. But the second string is an octave lower and the first string is an octave lower. So the third string is the high string of the Theorbo, which might seem a little bit weird, but the good news is that all the chord shapes are the same. Like A minor, it's just that the 2 strings, I say top strings, but they're the ones closest to the floor, are 1 octave lower. D minor. So it gives a nice compact sound that those 2 strings sort of blend with what you played before. This particular instrument I ordered not long after starting with the Brandenburg. It was made in 1996. And the interesting thing is that it was made in Australia, in Armidale, as a matter of fact. Armidale has a very famous, very good instrument maker called Peter Biffin. He's also an inventor of instruments. But his Theorbos and his Baroque guitars, I also have a Baroque guitar by him, are famous, and you find them all over the world. It's funny, but Australia actually has some of the top instrument makers in the world. We have Greg Smallman, who makes guitars for John Williams and others. We have Bill Bright, his harpsichords are very famous. And Peter Biffin with Theorbos. And there's also probably the most famous recorder maker in the world, Fred Morgan, who used to live in Daylesford. He's not with us anymore, but his instruments have a very high reputation too. So there's a lot of things happening in Australia, I'm happy to say. In the 1580s, there was a movement in Florence to recreate Greek antique drama. And what they thought was that they wanted to recreate the music too, to go with it. Now the Greeks used an instrument called kitara, and it was like a lyre instrument. Now kitarone is another name for Theorbo, and kitarone means big kitara, of course. So that's where the name comes from. And in the beginning of the history of this instrument, you usually see kitarone and not Theorbo. Theorbo came a little bit later. So what I needed for this new art form that they invented was an instrument with strong bass notes and to support the singers. So I'm talking about opera here. That was the birth of opera. So what I had to do was take a normal lute, a normal bass lute, and which has a big body like this one has, and then add an extra peg box on an extension. And the reason is that these long strings here, they can be twice as thin as if they would only have been going to here. So a thinner gut string, we're talking about gut strings here, so the gut can be quite kind of a dull sound if it's too thick. So by putting the peg box up there, you can use thinner gut strings and you have a bright, strong bass sound. thanks to that. That penetrates quite well. So that was the instrument of choice for the first operas. The main role for the theorbo is to provide accompaniment. That was why it was invented, really, especially to accompany singers, but also later on more and more other instruments, like violins, for instance. So that's what you mainly do. It's not really an instrument for concertos. That was not a role it had. But on the other hand, there are a lot of solo pieces, probably by not very well-known composers. I'm talking about Kapsberger, Piccinini, and so on. Not the ordinary household names exactly, but lots of interesting music that uses this peculiar, what we call the re-entrant tuning, which gives a lot of possibilities. You can do sort of harp-like sounds, where you use open strings together, and each string rings over the next one to give a special sound. So, but apart from that, and I think that's really interesting too, that you have to be creative. I read from a bass line, the same as the cello plays from, but I also have what we call a figured bass. Figures there tells me what harmonies to play, and I can play harmonies in all kinds of positions, or here, the same chord but in different positions. So you have to be quite creative. You can do a lot with your figured bass playing, what you call continuo playing. So it's a challenge, and quite a fulfilling thing to do in an orchestra, because you can make a difference to how things are perceived, whether it's dramatic or serene and calm or whatever it is.